First Lady, thank you for having me here today.
Yes.
Family and friends. I also want to thank this amazing committee who put this program together,
Yes.
especially the decorating committee, because I know for sure my grandmother would have loved this. But without a doubt, I walked in and saw the gold and I was like, yeah. She's smiling right about now. So again, thank you. And I also want to thank the person who put together the slideshow as well. That was wonderful. Well, it's certainly an honor and certainly a privilege to be given an opportunity to pay a tribute today to a very special person, Elaine Maxine LeMelle-Palms, whom I simply call Momo, right?
All right.
But I'd like to begin with something a little funny, a little icebreaker, if you will, more for me than for you. As I'm traveling, sometimes I grow tired of reading, sometimes I grow tired of listening to music, and so in order to entertain myself, I sometimes eavesdrop on little conversations going on around me. Yeah, I'm my grandmother's granddaughter. I'm a little inquisitive, right? So, on this one particular day, not long ago, I overheard a conversation between two passengers. This lady was seated next to me. She was reading her Bible, and along comes this gentleman, and he sits down next to her. And he pops up with a question that I guess perplexed her, but also caught my attention. He looked at her and he said, "You don't really believe all the stories in that thing, do you?" And she goes, "What are you talking about? This Bible? Of course I do. I believe all the stories that are going on in here." So he said, "Well, what about that story of the man who was swallowed and eaten by a fish? You don't really believe that, do you?" And she said, "You talking about the story of Jonah? Of course I do." So without hesitation, he said, "Well, I don't know about that, but that just doesn't seem like that could happen. How do you think he survived all that time?" And she said, "Well, scratched her head a little bit and thought, I'm not sure, but when I get to heaven, I'll be sure to ask him." Right? To which he replied quickly, "Well, how do you know he's going to be in heaven?" She said, "Then you'll have to ask him." Right? And when I began composing my thoughts, like any good educator or teacher would do, right, Aunt Teresa? I looked for purpose, and I looked for meaning. Well, I didn't have to look long, nor did I have to look far. I didn't even have to look past her first name, which is Elaine. Which surprisingly to me, well, actually not surprising to me, her name, which actually also happens to be my mother's name, means a light or a shining. And perhaps both my mother and my grandmother had a prophecy to fulfill. And perhaps maybe it was just to raise me. I'm not sure. But from the day Ida and Edward LeMelle gave her her namesake on April 2nd, 1929, she was destined to be a light for what I will identify as the least, the last, and the lost.
All right.
My grandmother, Elaine Palms, was definitely a shining light for all she encountered. So you see, to me, she was like a beacon beaming from a tower lighthouse, ensuring and guiding many to safe harbor. Which reminded me of the biblical quote that she would often state. And she would say, "God uses good people to do great things." You agree?
Yes.
Because I want you to be able to reflect on those that allow you to stand on their shoulders, right? You see, to me, my grandmother was remarkable in so many ways. She lived her life to the fullest and touched so many people during her time here with us. We all, I believe, have a colorful array of a kaleidoscope of memories that we will always carry with us. I know I do. And today we are gathered here to honor her legacy, the legacy as she's known here at Troop Tabernacle as Mother Elaine Palms. So allow me again to reflect a few special moments and memories of my grandmother, memories that I hope today personify her and a life well lived. As I look through that colorful kaleidoscope of her life, I see memories, but I want to share a few impactful memories that I believe helped change the trajectory of my livelihood. Before leaving for college, I lived with my grandmother in my last 3 years of high school. I mostly grew up along Alice Street in Sulphur, right? And spent most of my days, of course, on Teresa when I wasn't in school. I spent most of my days on that ballpark. It was on that ball field that I recall some of the fondest meetings with my grandmother. And I know I definitely visited with her long before I was able to step foot on that ball field. But nonetheless, some of my greatest memories of her happened right there in short periods of time. On this particular day, we, meaning most kids in the neighborhood, would be intensely engaged again in the game. And somebody would inevitably yell out, "Hey, Treese, your grandmother's here?" Or I would notice her big Cadillac pulling up on the ball field, right? Either way, I pretended like I didn't see her. But I desperately hoped that she was watching. Then imagining that she was, while fielding a ball, I would exert myself to make the next catch, even if it was on the other side of the field. Don't ask. Or if I was batting, I'd try to bat that ball right out of the park. Uncle Bushy knows I can do that. I think my brother can too, right, Keith? I'm not sure why I felt like I needed to show her off my athletic skills to her, or my baseball skills, because I can certainly attest to the fact that she didn't care anything about athletics, right? I think, though, what it was is I just wanted her to be proud of me. That's it. I would imagine her sitting there in her car, watching me and saying to herself or someone nearby, "That's my granddaughter, you know." Or, "You go, Red." Now, if you know my grandmother, she was probably saying this. "Now I know this little red girl sees me here in this hot sun," right? She's making me wait in this hot sun. I can't even believe that. But honestly, the sheer opportunity to be in her presence excited me so. Just to be able to spend a few minutes with her on the ballpark. During one of her quick visits while she was running errands in town, or spending time at her home. Truly, to this day, I often think about those encounters, but know that I've never, ever lost the feeling of wanting to be near her, nor of making her proud. And I'm almost 50 years old. She had what I would like to call an uncanny way of attracting onlookers to draw attention, to stand out. She had a presence, per se. And maybe it was because of the stylish hats, much like some that I see here today, or the snazzy outfits or shoes that she wore, or the sparkling jewelry, or even the sweet scent of her perfume. Whatever it was, I believe her attraction was a beam of light. One that would draw you in, much like a lighthouse would draw in passing ships and guide them to safe harbors. In fact, her name, if you recall, Elaine, a light or a shining, truly, I believe, captured the essence of her magnificent aura and personality. And as the kaleidoscope turns, I use it to look again at her life. And I see many valued and meaningful roles that my grandmother played. First and foremost, I see Elaine Palms, one of the matriarchs of our family. She loved her family unequivocally and unselfishly. Difficult times. There were times I allowed naysayers to get under my skin, or the failure to cause doubt, or I would lose faith. And she would say, "Red, come here, let me tell you something." And I promise I use this today. You have to faith it until you make it. Girl, you got to believe like Paul asked Timothy to believe. You got to stir up your hope and believe that the forces in life that are for you are far greater than those that are against you. But I especially noted my grandmother rising each day with an aching body to prepare for the day, and each morning she would begin with a light breakfast and her first round of many meds, just to be able to do simple things that you and I take for granted. Anyway, as she was reading those scriptures, she would occasionally pop up in her chair and stretch and look out through that window in her kitchen, which I like to call the window to what was happening in Mossville. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? So you've been there, little window. I'm like, well, how are you looking at that thing from the table? But she would stretch up and look, right? Nonetheless, after looking out that window, sometimes it would be followed up with a quick phone call to Aunt Della or someone else in the family, Uncle Butch, to gather more information about what was going on in Mossville, or just to share some additional news that was going on. But I tell you what, it never really distracted her from doing what she did on a daily basis, and that was learning from the scriptures. Yeah. She never missed anything, though. But frequently, while reading those scriptures, she'd call me to the table, and she would read scriptures that she thought was applicable to my life, or whatever was going on in the world. That's where I get that from, her theory. I know I'm Catholic. We got 45 minutes and we out. But Elaine spent a lot of time with me with those. Yes. And she'd call me to the table again. She'd read those scriptures to me. She'd ask me to interpret them. She would ask me to apply them to my life, or her life, or someone else's. Well, sometimes she would just ask me questions about words and their meanings. Yeah. And boy, did I make up some stuff along the way. Whew. I'm sorry, Mom. But it happened. My grandmother. I just loved being near her. And there were some days that I would worry so much about how she was feeling that I would come up to her and I'd talk to her and I'd say, Mom, are you sure you're okay? And even though I could see on her face she was in pain, she'd say, no, I'm okay. I have a heartbeat. I have good sense. I'm standing up. These old bones are starting to believe as well that God uses good people to do good things. Yes. Yes. Twisting that colorful kaleidoscope, I see Elaine Palms, the loving relative and friend, and the confidant. She could be counted on and depended on always. Yes. She was a woman of her word. God knows I try to embody that every day. Whether you needed a cup of sugar, a few dollars, a hot plate, sound counsel, an empathetic ear, a shoulder to lean on, sisterly or auntie love, or just a hug or companionable silence, she was that person. Yes. Ready, steadfast, and willing, and always offering great advice. The kaleidoscope keeps moving, but I want to make sure that you know that my grandmother led by example. She mentored many. She was a constant source of inspiration for me. But he also uses her still today, as her voice is right here on my shoulder. And whenever I ponder to resolve an issue or have a problem to solve, I hear my grandmother guiding my steps on a regular basis. And those of you who know me, Mabel's probably on the other side too. Right. But what keeps me standing is the fact that she endured pain and kept doing what she had to do every day. She touched so many people's lives so positively, especially mine. She left an amazing legacy of hope and optimism. And I believe she left the world a better place, especially than what she found it. So I'll close with this, because I know she's watching and listening. Mom, we definitely all miss you, but we remember you fondly. Yes. And we are grateful that your legacy lives on in the hearts of many of us. And by means of being honored for eternity throughout this great fellowship hall, here in this beautiful room at Truth Tabernacle, I believe that we are all better, not because we knew you, but because you loved each and every one of us. And I am, and all that I ever hoped to be, was because of her unselfish love. I hope that her legacy inspires someone here today to carry on what I believe to be a moral imperative that she exemplified, to the extent of helping hands, extending helping hands, again, to the least, the last, and the lost. For I have come to believe and know that God definitely used her to do great things. And I hoped, as I did so many days on that ball field, I hope that I've made her proud. Thank you.
Amen.